So, Brandon, thanks so much for joining me this afternoon. Always a pleasure and an honor to sit with you and put our minds together when it comes to the work that we're doing, the teaching that we're doing, and so forth. Mm. So, my teaching lately about diagnoses has been trending in a direction that I call holistic diagnoses. So while it includes things like DSM and ICD-10, it goes beyond these particular systems. I'm trying to see any thought, emotion, behavior, or belief that we or our patients might have as part of an ecosystem that includes, among other things, our entire body and mind, the physical environment that we live in, our upbringing, the cultural and religious background that we emerge from, and certainly the political economy in which we live. Each thought, feeling, and so forth plays a vital living role in this ecosystem. So instead of focusing on a, quote, symptom, close quotes, as being a problem that we're going to fix, I would like to understand the role that that symptom has in the bigger picture of a person's life. And from that place of a broader and deeper understanding, look together at what we might want to do to reset any of these pieces to create more of that life worth living.
Yeah.
I wonder what comes up for you as you hear about this trend in my own teaching and work.
Yeah, I love hearing that. I mean, I start to think about a full acceptance of somebody just as they are, and then being able to really dive in and see if I can understand them, understand what's going on with this, one thought within a context of one moment, so getting really granular, as you've talked about, and really understand the various aspects of that. I like what you said about the different things that go into it, the physical environment, the upbringing, the culture, the political environment. I mean, I think there's so much that can be part of, kind of like part of the water if you're a fish, like what's the context around you that we may not, either I may not see and acknowledge as the therapist, or even my patient may not be cognizantly aware of in that moment, because it's so pervasive in our culture. Like there might be kinds of othering that happens, or microaggressions, things that are subtle, that are kind of woven in, and some people, like some friends of mine, would kind of just ignore those things, come to kind of ignore them, kind of dissociate from them a bit. But bringing them up can enlighten what's going on, the feelings that somebody's feeling, because I think people are still perceiving things on a gut level, on an emotional level. So thinking about some of that, we've been also talking about diversity in some of the trainings in the Feeling Good Institute, and I think thinking about sort of the differences in kind of the intersection between society and how I might, who I am and what society is like, in the intersection between there, and if there are any challenges or conflicts or things that happen because of my body type and the way society is made, or because of my being transgender, having a different identity than sort of the majority of people, or the power structure, and then being other, maybe in subtle ways, or maybe things are kind of built into society. And so understanding all of that, I think, can enlighten the diagnosis and kind of what's going on with the person. And as you're saying, kind of how can we then decide with them on maybe facilitating, shifting things if they want to shift things in terms of living a vital life.
As I was listening to you, I was thinking of a conversation in one of our training groups this week. A colleague from East Asian culture, was talking about this belief that she had, which was that she shouldn't expect to receive emotional support from her husband.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard that from my cultural framework.
Yeah.
But there was another colleague from the same culture in the group. And she pointed out that in this culture, women are conditioned not to expect emotional support from their husbands.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas I might have seen it as self-defeating interpersonal belief, my two colleagues helped me understand, no, this is how women would grow up and enter into marriage in this particular culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that we are who we are, for better and for worse, because our environment is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And to have an understanding of that, whether we're the patient or the provider, I think gives us something essential in the work that we do.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think there's something about the assumptions that we make. And I think CBT talks a lot about assumptions and, in the lenses and the distortions that we have, but there's assumptions that I can make as a therapist that then bring my own environment, my own upbringing that I may not be aware of, and how to, I guess one of the questions that I have is how to really facilitate tuning in to somebody enough and to have that kind of cultural openness and develop more awareness, or at least tuning in or asking the right questions in order to be able to understand such things like you're bringing out.
Been reading Heinz Kohut, psychodynamic teacher and writer. And I have something he wrote in one of his lectures back in the 80s, I think it was. He was talking about this, but talking about it in a particular context. So in talking about an empathic understanding of someone who's not Heinz Kohut, he said that his curiosity about the big picture of that person's life is teaching by example an attitude that the patient could have towards himself. So in creating an atmosphere, which he said is not an artificial atmosphere, because it's real for me, in wanting to know what makes this person tick. What are all those moving parts? There's a broadened understanding that the patient is encouraged to have about himself. Kohut wrote, I want to know what's going on with the patient, how he experiences and relates to his difficulties. In essence, it's an attitude of expanded self-empathy, an expanded capacity to be empathic with his past, with aspects of himself that he doesn't yet own, and with future possibilities. So I noticed that in the exchange that happened in our training group, when the second colleague pointed out to the first colleague, well, this is how we're taught to be wives in this culture. That brought a sense of insight and relief, I think, for the person who realized she had this particular belief that she couldn't rely on her husband for emotional support. And I really liked how Kohut pointed out that if we're curious about that, if we ask the questions we have, we don't understand the big picture of this person. Even if they come from, in my case, Irish Catholic, middle class white family.
Yeah.
Another Irish Catholic middle-class person might share some things with me, but they're going to have parts of experience that are not my parts. And if I can be curious about that big picture, I'm modeling something for that person that they might then want to embody themselves.
Yeah, I love that idea of curiosity. And when I hear you talk about Heinz Kohut, I think about like a curiosity and a kind of appreciation of somebody. I mean, there's sort of if I can really enjoy and, love my patient in a sense of, obviously in a sense of just enjoying them as a person, really appreciating them as a person, and being curious about what it is that they're going through and what are the different aspects of themselves, and showing them to that. I like that idea of kind of a reflection that you can see the therapist's, genuine curiosity and genuine kind of appreciation of somebody, and then explore those things and be able to internalize that.
Mm-hmm. When I first started training as a psychotherapist, I was training at the Milton Erickson Institute. And so Milton's work has informed my understanding of things like diagnoses and many aspects of providing patient care. And I was rereading Erickson recently, and he had written this: every person's map of the world is as unique as their thumbprint. There are no two people alike. No two people who understand the same sentence the same way.
Yeah.
In reading that, I remember a story that I think Steve Gilligan told me about Milton was training some medical students there in Phoenix. And he brought a person into the auditorium who didn't say anything, just stood there and asked the medical students to write a description of the person. So the students wrote very similar things. It's a white male, about 25 years old, about 6 foot, about 100, blah, blah, blah. But then they diverged radically on eye color. So half of the people said blue-eyed, the other half said brown-eyed. So what had happened was the fellow had walked into the room, the students were seated on one side or the other. This person had 2 different eye colors. And the students assumed from their position what the other side would look like. So I thought Milton was quite smart at sending a message. You need to look. You need to look at the whole picture. And you can't safely make assumptions. Oh, I've seen this. And then proceed to diagnosis and treatment. You really need to take it in a very granular way. I remember, I think it was Bill O'Hanlon told me a story of, he was training with a group of folks there at Milton's house, and they brought in a patient, and Milton was observing Bill working with this fellow. And Bill, in the course of talking to him, was looking up like this. The neuro-linguistic reprogramming people would have a theory about that. Oh, he's looking up into that sector. And so Milton stopped everything and he said, Bill, the patient isn't up there. Look at the patient. Because that patient in real time is giving you massive data. Their pupillary dilation, the tone of their skin, their breathing rate, their posture, their muscle tonus. All this information is coming at you. If you're not looking at it, you're going to miss it. You need to look at the person. So I think this is the message that Kohut was giving as well. Be curious, be thorough. Really take this human being in before you presume that you know what's
Mm.
called for and proceed to the treatment portion of the program.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Milton was so astute and so creative. And I think also some of the psychoanalytic training on countertransference is important as well there, because we can project things in ourselves onto someone else if we don't have kind of we don't know ourselves well. And so some work on that to be able to know ourselves, and then really, I think that can help us to tune into other people also and be curious.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is probably not self-serving for someone who teaches CBT, but I've also been trending away from this notion of becoming expert at something.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of my students come to me and they want to become experts. They want to have the answers to the questions. They want to know what to do next. These are things I hear quite often in our consultation and classes. And I was reading recently a book that I first read in college, Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And there's a lovely passage in there where Pirsig is talking about breaking off a screw on an engine cover on his Triumph, I think it was, and going, oh, now I don't know what to do. I have a manual that tells me how to adjust the valves in my motorcycle, but it doesn't talk about what you do if you break a bolt or a screw. And then he expands that into a conversation about the virtue of stuckness. And like me, Pirsig was a Zen guy.
Yeah.
So he said it's kind of like getting a koan. In the koan tradition in Zen, we're given these problems. One of the early koans I was given was, there's a tablet at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and there's a name engraved on it. Whose name is it? So at first blush, and second, maybe third blush, we're stuck there. How would I know, right? Whose name is on that? And what Pirsig was saying is this stuckness is not a problem to be avoided. It's the great opportunity. We could see our patients who come to us because they're anxious or depressed or in relational standoffs of some kind as being stuck. And that stuckness in the bigger picture of that person's development is the great opportunity. So I like to encourage my students to not run away from not knowing, but to really lean in there and to disclose to a patient, boy, I don't know what to say right now. Let me sit with this for a moment. Sending a message that something important is happening. The therapy is, quote, stuck. But I think the stuckness is the road forward. It's the door that can open if we lean in, if we don't fall back into some expert thing, which I think pulls us away from the moment. Oh, I know what to do. I know what to say. But to go, gee, like you, I don't quite know. I feel kind of stuck right now.
Yeah, I love that. I think of, because I think often I may feel, well, patients often feel hopeless when they feel stuck, and I may feel hopeless as well at helping them, at facilitating them getting unstuck, and if I view that as my role. So if I can view that as an opportunity and sort of transmit that and show that I'm okay, that it's okay to be stuck, or I'm stuck as well sometimes, and that's not something to fear, or maybe just something to be curious about. It's interesting.
Mhm. I wonder how much of our emotional suffering, our anxiety or depression, or our professional anguish, I don't know what to do,
Mm, mm,
comes from that reluctance to just embrace in a curious way these koans.
mhm, mhm.
I know times in my life where I've been anxious or been depressed. Those have been my koans. It's not something from, Chinese literature from the Tang Dynasty or something. It's emerging in the fact pattern of my own life.
Yeah.
And it might be that the way that I've organized things has carried me along well enough so far, but then something changes.
Mhm, mhm.
And what I'm bringing to the great work of my living and dying is no longer sufficient for me to feel
Mm.
good enough in that process.
Mm.
So every time that has happened for me,
Mm.
on the other side of working that through
Mhm.
lies the larger life,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
life that is more stable,
Mm.
that's founded on more adaptive beliefs
Mm.
than the beliefs that had carried me up to that point.
Mhm.
So instead of running from that or rejecting stuckness or disliking ourselves in that stuck place,
Yeah.
if we can sit in an open way there
Yeah.
and sit with someone who has some skill, has some training,
Right.
who can bring some new material to that moment. This is what all of my spiritual teachers have done. They can't do any work for me, but
Mhm.
they can inform the work that I'm doing
Yeah.
in a way that keeps me from taking a bunch of detours or spinning my wheels,
Right.
and really helps me get traction on my own development and growth.
Yeah.
So if that's the role we're casting ourselves in as therapists, I think any moment in therapy, whether it's, moment of great stuckness, moment of great breakthrough, can be just the right moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a beauty to that. It seems like it takes some faith in a sense. I mean, and maybe that's part of what having a master there, somebody who can sit with a person and kind of encourage them to be curious about the stuckness. I think a lot of folks get, and myself included, can get to feel hopeless and when I feel stuck, or even in a moment, or there's all sorts of reverberations of that with social anxiety, like, or my mind goes blank and then I'm like, oh my gosh, there's it also reminds me of the there's that Chinese character, and I'm not sure if this is accurate in depth, but the Chinese character for crisis, or the two characters that's made up of, I at least have read, is danger plus opportunity, which has a beauty to it. And then I also think about improvisation. Milton Erickson, with hypnosis, and then Jeff Zeig has sort of been taking some of his ideas and looking at improvisation and the theater, and the idea of kind of how do we develop skills of improvisation. And I think of improvisation as moving with whatever happens, sort of saying yes to things in the moment, and when we have no idea where it's going to go, and moving with that and seeing what happens, being curious.
I like that very much. So the danger would be that we would retreat from the stuck place and fall back into the old way.
Yeah.
And then maybe experience despair, bitterness, maybe suicide lies down that path.
Right.
There's no hope.
Yeah.
And the opportunity would be to sit with a skilled other. We're getting some preliminary data from our low intensity CBT pilot in the Pomona Valley now. The outcomes are looking very promising. So these are people who, most didn't finish high school. None of them have professional degrees or licenses or anything. but they're just learning the fundamentals of cognitive and behavioral therapy under very deeply skilled and compassionate mentor, Victoria Chickerell.
Yeah.
And they're now the skilled folks sitting with the Latinx population there in the Valley and producing wonderful results. So to have that kind of collaboration, which probably at the end of the day is like contact improv, right? We can't know ahead of time what's going to happen. Or in my case, I've never done contact improv. Heather Clegg has helped me understand a little bit about that. But it's like Argentine tango, which I have done, where you don't know until you know. You know, I'm moving a certain way. How is my partner going to respond? And then her follow becomes my lead, and we create something in the moment. So an image of therapy that would lie in that direction, as opposed to I am the expert. I have the answers. I know what to say. I know what you should be doing, and so forth, which by contrast feels very rigid and brittle and kind of grandiose, right?
Right. Yeah, sure. Right. Yeah. Yeah, it strikes me that it'd be sweet to, I mean, I think our culture makes some presumptions about emotions and sort of being afraid of emotions in some ways, or afraid of hopelessness, or afraid of being stuck. And it strikes me as you're talking about that it would be nice to have, you know, some education built into our system of kids, that in kind of a manual, owner's manual for the mind and for the human experience and the emotions, and knowing some of these principles of CBT, of psychology, of also of this idea of the searching for treasure, as I've come to call it, but like the positive reframe of, you know, just really looking at, what does that hopelessness say about me that shows beautiful values? How might it be, you know, how might it be helpful in telling me when to stop trying something when I'm banging my head against the wall, or, you know, how might it be advantageous? Those kinds of questions, which I think are really super rich, if one can engage in them in a thoughtful and curious way.
How would we teach kids, or how would we teach our patients, or teach ourselves the virtue of stuckness? I hadn't thought of that, but I agree with you. If we could, when we're little, learn stuckness is our great opportunity.
Right.
How would we do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I love the koans that you talk about, and also I imagine being curious in different instances, and when we talk about, you know, tango or contact improvisation, even physical manifestations of stuckness. If one's playing around and there's kind of doesn't seem to be any way out, then just remarking on that, or being curious about what's this like, and what might be, how might we move with this, this kind of situation here where it seems like we're stuck. How might we move with that? I don't know. Yeah, what other, I mean, that's what I associate with. What else do you think? How might we encourage that kind of learning?
Yeah, so I was listening to you, I was thinking we could create in the classroom stuckness. We could give children a koan. And we wouldn't know the answer. We wouldn't present ourselves as teachers oftentimes do. Here's a math problem, work it out. I'll tell you if you got it right or wrong.
Right.
But the teacher would resign that role and just be a learner with the kids.
Yeah.
Boy, there's that name on that tablet at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. How can we figure that out? And then probably to positively reinforce any response a child would give. Without judging it, without saying, oh, that's right, that's wrong, or something. say, oh, I like that.
Mm.
Yeah, how would that work? How could we do that? To maybe open up a sense of wonder as opposed to a sense of expertise or a fund of knowledge.
Yeah.
The meta message there would be, it's good to wonder. It's good not to know. And to just bring in what Zen would call the beginner's mind, not the mind of the expert who has the answers, knows what to do. Here, just do this. But the beginner goes, gee, I don't know. But will look around and be much more creative than the expert could ever be.
Yeah.
Because she's not limiting herself to a particular fund of knowledge or orientation or so forth.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 I think it's so easy for us to limit ourselves. And there might be even some, I mean, it might be some unlearning to do for kids, and, you know, and kids might have more of the wisdom than somebody older may have, and being creative, being right there in the moment. Yeah.
Our colleague Matt May once told me that he thought, I don't know if these were his exact words, but the sense of wonder was the universal antidote for psychopathology. Walking around not knowing, right?
Yeah.
We brought a new puppy home from California, beginning of February. He was 8 weeks old. So I love walking around with him because he doesn't know anything. And whatever goes on, you know, the hummingbird that comes up or the leaf that blows across the patio or a sound off in the distance, he has that sense of complete attention, taking it in. And he reminds me, that's the way of being. I could do that as well, instead of hearing it and going, oh, that's the ruby throatback. Labeling it, dismissing it.
Right.
I could be open in that curious, the word awe comes to mind. A sense of awe. I think awesome has become a bit overused. No. But I think at the heart of that word, it's that sense of wonder, curiosity, awe that things are as they are, including ourselves, our stuckness, our psychopathology, quote and unquote. There's another label.
Right. Another label. Yeah. It kind of comes back full circle to me when you're talking about that, to empathy and acceptance as well. I mean, I love it. It just feels refreshing and so permissive of experience to see a dog looking at, oh, you know, there's a squirrel moving or something, you know, or a baby with kind of open-eyed wonder about the world and like, what is going on, and just kind of absorbing all this information, you know, as they do. And there's so many times in being with other people in society where we're kind of encouraged to get nearer or use labels, or when I was growing up and being bullied in 6th grade and kind of, you know, called these names and put in these labels, and I want to just be free and be accepted and, you know, be able to be curious. So there's something very validating about that, about just kind of the idea of encouraging creativity, encouraging being in the moment and the wonder, and not having to know, not having to be an expert, and like being, you know, personally going to medical school and it all being about, did you get the right answer on this? You know, are you responding in the right, did you remember all the criteria for this disease that, and when your attending physician is asking you at 3 a.m, and, you know, have to like know it right there. And, you know, I just want to be able to be, you know, accepted and be able to have some latitude and be curious and, you know, make mistakes.
Making mistakes. My oncologist, Don Lamb, developed the BCG protocol that has become the gold standard for bladder cancer treatment globally. And in talking to him about that, first thing he said was, oh, it wasn't my idea. One of my mentors said, Don, why don't you go in the lab and put some BCG in those rat bladders, see what happens. And then the next thing he said was it didn't work. So the early trials, I think he was at UCLA at the time. No, UCSD. This is at the same college I was at a couple of years later, I think. He failed. There was no response. But we could say, okay, he got stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Guy had an idea. Don liked it. He tried it. It didn't work. Now he's stuck.
Mm.
But he told me, but you see, I'm stubborn.
Mm.
So he started fooling around, right, with the dosage and with the length of the treatment and different kinds of cancers. And then the way started to open.
Mm.
So it was a wonderful moment in recent medical history where stuckness precipitated quite a wonderful step forward. But the essential ingredient was he leaned in to being stuck.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't go, oh, well, and walk away.
Yeah.
So cultivating that willingness to make mistakes, have things not work out, and not surrender the field, at least not immediately.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I mean, as you're speaking, I just notice like the kind of reaction to the word stuckness, even that's kind of like, I think, absorbed from the culture. It's like, oh, somebody's not supposed to be stuck, or that has to be resolved, right? So it's like really appreciating that and valuing that, showing that it's okay to be stuck, and I think it's really so beautiful. Mm-hmm.
It's been wonderful to read the transcript of some of Kohat's seminars he was giving to, I think it was new therapists at a university. They were treating, students who had just left home and were new university students and helping them with anxiety and depression and relational stuff. And I noticed in the transcripts that Kohat never gave anyone answers.
Mm-hmm.
He never said, do this.
Yeah.
He always, to quote a line from E. Cummings, he said something that asked a more beautiful question.
Yeah.
And I really liked that way of teaching. He wasn't presenting himself as, oh, if you have a problem, come to me, I'll solve it. Yeah. He was maybe bringing in that same sense of awe, of unknowing, of possibility. Well, we haven't considered this. What if we considered this?
Right.
Or we're assuming this. What else could we assume?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the students would rise to the occasion and come up with some great stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that I like to do in my teaching, is to create an atmosphere where we can be stuck. Say someone brings a case and is feeling stuck. We can all just be stuck together and wonder about what the possibilities might be there. Mm-hmm. And, at the end of the day, if there were a road forward that helped one patient, there's nothing to say that road forward would help anyone else.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And I think my students get stuck because they think, well, I'm going to figure out, if someone refuses to do homework, how to get them to do homework. Mm-hmm. And then I'll know when I get stuck.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah. How Daniel, how does, when someone is feeling hopeless and when they're feeling really down and they're feeling stuck, how do you convey the sense of the value of hopelessness and stuckness, or maybe just stuckness, without sort of being invalidating to them, like, or them feeling like they're kind of left there to flail without you being kind of with them? Or how do you navigate those situations? I find that challenging myself.
Boy, that is a tough one. Dr. Burns' Anti-Hopelessness Memo is a wonderful resource for team therapists who are sitting with someone who's experiencing this emotion, which I think David has said is perhaps the most undermining of psychotherapy, of all of the possibilities, feeling angry or anxious, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's that feeling hopeless that would really take us out at the knees.
Mhm, mhm.
A couple of thoughts come to mind here, and I'd offer them in the spirit of one size never fits all.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think sometimes the way that they have things set up, there is no hope that they will succeed.
Mhm, mhm.
Say they're demanding perfection from themselves or from
Yeah.
another human being,
Right.
and feeling hopeless because they and other human beings keep screwing things up.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah.
So their stuckness I'd see their stuckness as being the limitations of their own schema.
Yep. Yep.
And I would want to join that schema, appreciate it, see
Mhm.
its roots, see the role it has in the ecosystem of that individual's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then perhaps set a marker just outside
Uh-huh.
that would suggest there'd be a way to adapt the schema that I would perceive would not be hopeless.
Mhm, mhm.
And in this instance, it might be just accepting oneself as a fallible being who makes errors, who is not perfect.
Right. Right.
I think Kieran Horney's construct sheds a lot of light here.
Mm.
When we set up that idealized self and make a commitment to it.
Yeah.
She called that the vainglorious pursuit of the ideal.
Right.
That immediately we despise ourselves as we are.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And if that's the game we're playing, I think it's a hopeless game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've never known anyone who could aspire to and embody an ideal.
Yeah.
I keep running into people like me who are just themselves.
Yeah.
They may have ideas about an ideal, but
Mhm,
I wouldn't even know how to go about trying to approach an ideal
mhm.
sense that I had about myself. So I would want to understand, appreciate, empathize, connect with the person in their schema,
Mm.
and then notice that there's another way of putting things together.
Mhm, mhm.
How about you? What comes to mind when you think about that particular emotion and the stuckness that
Mm.
can certainly arise from it?
Yeah. I mean, I love what you're saying. First of all, I had a mentor, Jim Gustafson, when I was doing my residency, who would kind of hone in on what's the dilemma that the patient is there with, and just really be there with them and kind of clarify it. And he was great at distilling kind of, here's the dilemma, and just accepting that that's where the person's at. And then there was a hint, kind of like you're saying, that there's kind of like, yeah, there may be a way to change that. It may involve some sacrifice of something, some kind of ideal or something. I think, for me, I think with hopelessness, it is challenging. I think first I tend to check myself if I'm starting to become hypnotized by the patient's hopelessness and starting to feel hopeless myself. And then wanting to be curious and engage with them in what is going on here, and how are you feeling, and what could be, what could be the values that are represented here. What could be the kind of doing somewhat of a positive reframe with them, or just kind of gently wondering while validating the distress that they're feeling. And I think when I think about patients in that kind of a conversation, which is difficult for me, but I think if I can keep myself kind of having a bit of a perspective, I guess like we're talking about, like of trusting that there's some creative things that may happen, and sort of trusting that there's all kinds of possibility within a moment. And so I think that helps me from feeling too hopeless myself about the situation, which gives me a little more latitude. And then joining them with that, and then hopefully they see that in me, that I'm not so hopeless there, but I'm with them and I understand them, and I'm not invalidating them or saying they should not be hopeless, but I'm also validating how difficult it is to feel hopeless and to feel stuck. That maybe that provides a little bit of ability to start to become creative.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you're saying what Kohat was saying, that we can model an empathy and a curiosity that the patient could then see, and if they were so inclined, begin to embody themselves.
Yeah.
And I think you're saying that we would not also become hopeless as an essential ingredient there. That we could sit with a person hour after hour, week after week, and see the possibilities there. See that in their current construct, there's a high probability they will continue to suffer, feel depressed, and so forth. But to also see they're one heartbeat away from a much larger life.
Right.
And I think I can do that if I'm working on orienting to the larger life. If I'm getting stuck, sitting with myself in a kind and loving way and breaking through into something larger, which I'll then get stuck in at some other point and have the opportunity to sit with myself again. If I'm doing that, then I think patients, well, they'll understand it. Daniel's not hopeless. He really understands me. He really gets me, but he's not hopeless. Now, what's up with that?
Yeah, right. Curiosity, right? Yeah, well, what's up with that? Wait, what?
We were doing a group treatment program. It's actually a pilot study, Team CBT and Kundalini Yoga. We're in the process of writing up the paper and hope to publish it later this year. But there were wonderful moments in this group treatment setting. Julie Staples and I were offering. One was there was a patient sitting next to me who had experienced some really hard stuff and had really fallen down the rabbit hole of chemical dependency and was climbing back out. And she came to our program, 12-week program, and made huge strides. But at one point, we were going around the room, and so it was her turn to speak, and she said, "I want what he has." She pointed at me. And then everyone cracked up, right? But I thought she was pointing to a deep truth, that there was an okayness with myself that I was expressing in that moment, and she recognized it. And over the course of the program, I saw her begin to embody that too, to no longer be running away from who she really was, but to just say, "Hey guys, here I am." So I think we can offer that, but we can only offer it if we have it. Well, Brandon, I'm, per usual, so grateful to have had this time with you. And somehow it's reassuring to me that the things that are catching my attention or catching the attention of someone that I respect and care for. So thank you for sharing yourself, your thoughts, your feelings with me. And I'll look forward to reconnecting with you again sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Daniel. Thanks for inviting me here, and thanks for sharing your beautiful mind and thoughts. I love the way that you think and your heart as well. Really a joy.
Well, it sounds like it's general congratulations all around. All right, my friend, until next time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you next time.